Something that you should keep in mind when you are designing your basic block pattern is eventually this bodice is going to have a sleeve in there. So there's room and ease here at the side seam. That way you're able to move around and breathe and lift your arm up. Also, this is not going to fit inside the bust area, so it's going straight across. So it's similar to where you're wearing a dress shirt. One of the most important things that I'll be teaching you is how to get this side seam to make sure it's straight up and down and making sure that the armhole is balanced before we go and start to do a custom sleeve for this. So let's go ahead and start by getting our vertical measurements, and then we'll move into getting our horizontal measurements. Take out a piece of paper, and as I do these measurements, go ahead and write them down. And at the top of the paper, let's start with the word front draft, because this will be all the measurements for the front, and then we'll do the measurements for the back. For finding the waist on a live person, what I would do is I would take some kind of a bright cord that has a little bit of elastic to it. And then what you'll do is you'll have your client tie this around their waist. And you'll want it on there a little bit snug in there. And you'll want them to kind of roll it up and roll it down and move around until it wants to just rest in this one same spot every time. At first, your client is going to be like, hey, that's too high, because they're used to having their jeans, like the top of their pants, lower than their waist. But what you want is their actual natural waist. So wherever that cord will fit up in their waist area, once you have that location, make sure your shirt is down low below that. And I would even chalk it a little bit just to make sure it's not moving around when you start doing these measurements. The next thing we want to know is, what size of paper do we need for completing this draft? So what we're going to do is we're going to measure from the top of the dress form down here to the waist, and I'm getting 17, and I want to add 7 more to that, so 24 would be a nice piece of paper for this. So 24 long. And then we're going to measure from center front going along the bust, so over the bust area for the largest measurement possible, out to the side seam. I'm getting almost 9, so I'm going to round it up to 9. And I'll add 7 more to that, so let's do 16. If I was doing this measurement on a client, what I would do is I would measure from her chin going down to her waist, and then add 7 more inches to that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take the measurements that would be the longest measurement from the front. So that's going to be from the shoulder at neck, going to the waist at center front. Also, as I pass over the bust on a dress form, I want to put a pencil in here so my measurement does not pull inside of the bust area and make this too short. Down here at the waist, I'm getting 16 3/4. Be sure to write this down if you're doing this video for the first time. The next measurement I want to do is going to be from the waist at center front to the neck at center front. Again, I'm going to pass over a pencil so my measuring tape does not go in between the bust and make this measurement too short. And then I come up here to center front at the neck, and it's 14 1/2. The next measurement is going to be from center front at the waist, going across her bust and out here to the shoulder armhole ridge. And the measurement I'm getting is 16 3/4. The next vertical measurement that we're going to need will be here at the side seam. This is going to be from the bottom of the plate along the side seam to the waist at side seam. On your person, it's going to be right under where the juncture where their arm stops and the side of their body starts. So it'd be right there, measuring down to the waist. So you're going to start by putting the measuring tape here at the bottom of the plate, and then you're going to measure down to the side seam at waist, and I'm getting 8 3/4. Now when you're taking this side seam measurement, you want to be careful that you're not just dropping straight down in the air and getting that measurement. You want to follow along with the side of their body. So some people it might be curving in, some people it might be coming out right here. So make sure your tape follows that distance the whole way down so you're getting an accurate measurement. Now let's move in and we'll get some of our horizontal measurements. The first one we're going to want is right here at the shoulder. We want to know the distance from the armhole ridge out to the neck. And what I'm going to use, I'm going to just take my sewing ruler because it's nice and flat, and I can measure from the ridge to the neck. And I want to make sure I'm not poking too hard into the neck area. This should be relaxed a little bit off of her neck. And the measurement I'm getting is 5 inches. For this measurement, we're going to start at center front at the neck, and we're going to come out here to the shoulder armhole ridge area. And I'm going to have my measuring tape so it's flush, touching her skin all the way up to the armhole ridge. And then when I'm looking at this measurement, I'm looking right in the air, right here at that shoulder armhole ridge. And I'm getting 7 1/8. So on your dress form, we need a measurement here in between her neck and her bust. This area up here is called the chest area. What we're going to do is we're going to come down 3 inches on our draft, and we need to know this measurement from here to here. This location right here on the armhole ridge, at first it's kind of just a guess where you're measuring to. And then later on, once we start developing the armhole, we might cut in a little more or we might add a little bit more. So at this point, just get your best guess. So for me, I will measure down 3 inches, and then I'll come across. So horizontally, I'm going from center front out to that armhole ridge, and I'm getting 6 1/8. We want to find the horizontal balance line. So this is going to be measuring from the neck to the waist, and then divide that measurement in half, and you'll have your horizontal balance line. For this measurement, what we're going to do is along the horizontal balance line, I want to measure from center front out to the bust apex and also continuing here to the side seam. If you're doing this on a live person, basically the bust apex would be the pointiest part of their bust. For different people, that location is going to move all over the place. If you're not exactly sure where to measure that location, one way that you can find it is when we do our measurement that goes from the waist out to the shoulder armhole ridge, where that crosses over the horizontal balance line, you can put your bust apex right there. Since we have a dress form here and it's got the princess panel already built in, I can see following my horizontal balance line, the bust apex would be right at the cross section of that princess panel. The first measurement is going to be 3 5/16 to the bust apex. And then we'll continue measuring all the way out to the side seam. And I'm measuring the outside edge of my black tape to give it just a little extra room. And that's 8 3/4. For this measurement, I want to measure from center front at the waist. And we're going to go over to the princess panel at the waist and continue measuring all the way over here to the side seam at the waist. So using my paper here that I've labeled with center front, I'm going to go ahead and get this started by taping this right along center front at the waist. Then with my pencil, I'll follow along the waist and I'll come out here to where we have our princess panel. And I'll put a line for the princess panel and a dot right above that. And then I want to continue measuring along the waist out here to the side seam. And again, I'm going to use the outside edge of my black tape from the side seam to add that little bit of ease. And then above that mark, I want to put S for side seam. Now for those of you who are following this video for the first time and doing the same measurements that I'm doing, Let me give you the measurements right now. So going from center front out to this first princess panel is 3 inches. And then continuing from this princess panel, going all the way out to the side seam is going to be 3 1/8. Now for sizes 0 through 4, I just measure right to the outside of my tape, and that's plenty of ease. If I'm doing size 6 and 8, I would add another 1/8 of an inch beyond this side seam. And then if I was doing sizes 10 and larger, I would add a full 1/4 inch extra beyond the side seam for ease in the waist. Now all of the measurements that we're taking from the dress form are going to be for the right side of the dress form. Whenever you're doing any kind of a master pattern that's symmetrical all the way around, it's always going to be for the right side of the body. You'll also notice this when you buy store-bought patterns, that all of the pattern pieces are for the right side and then everything gets mirrored for the left side. So as we move around to the back, for taking back measurements, we want to start at center back and come back out to her right arm. The first thing we're going to want to know is how large of a piece of paper are we going to need for the back draft. What I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from the top of the dress form down to the waist and add another 5 inches, so we're getting 24. For the width of our pattern piece, we're going to want to know what's pretty much the widest point here at her back, and it's going to be somewhere right underneath her arm, so the bottom of the plate coming over to the center back. So let's go ahead and take that measurement. I'm getting about 8.5, so let's call it 9. We'll add another 8 inches to that, so this will give us 17. So now that we're starting the back draft patterns, go ahead and label on your paper that this is for the back draft. And then we're going to start with all of the vertical measurements. So now let's get some of the measurements here from the back. For the longest measurement, what we're going to get is from center back at the waist, I'm going to have 0. And I'm going to come up here to the neck at her shoulder, and I'm getting 16 7/8, so almost 17. The next measurement is going to be from center back at waist, following along the back up to the neck, and I'm getting 15 13/16. The next measurement, I want to go from center back at waist out here to the armhole ridge. Now, since the inches is on this side of my tape, as I come out here to the armhole ridge, my tape wants to keep falling off the body. So what I'll do is I'll turn it over and I'll start here at the shoulder armhole ridge. So this I'll start with 0. And then I'll come down to center back at the waist. And I'm getting 16 13/16. The next vertical measurement that we're going to want is at the side seam. So this again will be from the plate to the side seam at waist. And we already have this measurement from the front, and it was 8 3/4. Now we're ready for our horizontal measurements coming down the back. The first one is going to be here at the shoulder armhole ridge to the neck. We've already measured this from the front, and that was 5 inches. For this measurement, I'm going to go from center back at neck out to the shoulder armhole ridge. Same as the front, I'm going to make sure I'm coming right out here into the air and hitting this point. And the measurement that I'm getting is 7 3/8. On the front of the dress form, if you remember, we had a horizontal balance line right here along her apex. For the back, we also need a horizontal balance line, and this is going to pass over right where your shoulder blade is poking out. Now, in general, the location for that is going to be 1/4 of the distance of the back. So, for instance, if I were to measure from the neck down to the waist along center back, if I divided that in half, and then if I divided that in half one more time, we would have a quarter of the distance. On this dress form, you'll notice there's already a little tack nail inside of there at that quarter distance. So that's our horizontal balance line. Now I can measure from this quarter location out to the armhole ridge, and I'm getting 6 1/2. For sizes 0, 2, and 4, don't worry about adding any ease to that. If you're going to do sizes 6 and larger, take that measurement and add a 1/4 inch to it. The next measurement we're going to want is where is the bottom of the plate according to center of the back. If you remember from the front, what we did is we split the front up into thirds, came across, and that was the bottom of the plate. For the back, this is a longer distance here from the center back neck to waist. So what we're going to do is we're going to split that in half, and we're going to come across and find where is the location of this plate. So take out your paper that we used to find our quarter measurement, and in here we can come and find our halfway measurement. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a pin right along that halfway measurement. So if you're doing this with a client, what you can do is you can mark that halfway location, put a pin in their shirt, so then you're able to take a small cord and we can use it for determining the plate location. Now as you come across with this cord, you want to make sure you're following something. So for instance, I'm following those counters behind me, and I can make sure that I'm perfectly horizontal as I come around to the side seam. And now I can see this is the halfway location from the back. And then I can measure up to the bottom of the plate. So for instance, the bottom of the plate is 3/8 of an inch above the halfway point. So write that down and we'll use that measurement later. Now when you're finding this bottom of the plate location, it's okay if you're off a little bit. You're basically taking an educated guess at first. Once we put the pattern pieces back onto your dress form, you're going to notice right away if things are not matching up, and you'll be able to make your adjustments later. So for now, it's just your best guess. Now that we know the location is about 3/8 of an inch above center back, I'm going to go ahead and take this measurement. So I'm going to go from center back over to the side seam at the bottom of the plate, and I'm getting 8 3/8. For the waist measurement, we want to go from center back at waist and measure along the waist out here to the first princess panel, and then continue measuring out here to the side seam. So now I'll take this paper where I've labeled it center back, and I'm going to tape it here at center back and the waist. And I want to move along the waist out to the princess panel here. So I'm going to put a line and a little dot above that. And then I want to continue measuring all the way out to the side seam. And again, I want to have the outside edge of my black tape, so I'm adding just a little bit of ease to this measurement. I'll put a line there, label this SS for side seam. For those of you who are following this video for the first time, let me give you those measurements. So from center back out to the princess panel is going to be 3 inches. And then from the side seam back to the princess panel is also 3 inches. Now, same thing as on the front. If I'm doing sizes 0 through 4, I'll just measure the side seam right to the outside of my tape. And then if I'm doing size 6 or 8, I'll add 1/8 of an inch. And if I'm doing sizes 10 and larger, I'll add 1/4 of an inch of ease to this measurement. Alright, so now that we have all of our measurements from our client or our dress form, we can go ahead and start to do the draft on the tabletop.